and many individuals in BJ is something that has literally changed my life. There is no other way to put it. And for that, I'm thankful. And that's why when I get an invitation from BJ, I instantly say yes. Have I not, Abir? Confirm, please confirm.
I confirm that, yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm happy to be here with you and to discuss the coming of Israeli elections, which we have so many, unfortunately, in the last 3 years. This is the 4th round, but I would like to try with your help and a few texts also that I brought to explore what I consider to be, let's start with a question. What do you think is, I would say at the center of these elections? You're all familiar with the news. So let's hear a few thoughts. What do you think? The pandemic? Okay, you can chat or open your mics. Both are fine with me. The pandemic, of course. Even though there is a good ratio of vaccination being, but still, you're right, of course. What else?
Survival.
Excuse me?
Survival.
Survival regarding what?
The state, how it is.
Well, okay, that.
Netanyahu.
Okay. Netanyahu. That's not survival. That's internal political confrontations, which you know very well from the past few years in the States as well, in other ways, but still, of course, Netanyahu is a big issue. The trial, the fact that that there are charges against him and he's trying to either evade them or, of course. So that's on top. And that for the first time we have challenges on his leadership from the right, which is something that we didn't have in previous rounds, Saar and others. Okay. Netanyahu policies, what else? I mean, you hear the news and you read the Times. Israel's soul. Wow. Where are you, Susan? Well, actually, you got very quickly to the point. I would like to claim, and I have very good proofs, that of course the Netanyahu issue is a central debate, almost to an extent that many people would claim that the whole election is either yes or no Netanyahu. This is the main, this is the main agenda. Either you're for Netanyahu or against Netanyahu. This is kind of but as a matter of fact, I would like to claim that, Susan, your definition is a serious undercurrent of what we see, and that the headlines of corruption and Netanyahu and all of that, they're there. But in the past few months, especially with the pandemic, and Nancy, you said pandemic, there have been issues that were suppressed in Israeli society for many, many years, and that have sprung to be, or have, came up and are still hidden. I want to claim that even maybe you won't hear about them so much in these elections because we're still grappling with the depth of these questions. It hasn't still, I think, permeated to the mindsets and the expression of many of the commentators and many of us. But from what I see, and this is what I would like to propose to you, I would like to suggest like a new pair of glasses, right? That when you will read the paper and listen to the news, either in Israeli media or other media, try to look on the issues that you hear, but with the undercurrent, which is something that I would like to open with you right now. Okay. Okay, the schism between Haredi community and other rest of society. I think that's very true, but I would like even to enlarge the circle. It's not only the question of the ultra-Orthodox. Let me start with some of the texts, by the way, have been translated particularly for this session. I've picked things from some of the commentators in Israel that I thought were extremely valuable for this discussion. They're short, some of them are short, but they're very insightful to my mind. We have lots are here too. Okay, some of the, okay. So the first, so here is the first one. Oops, sorry. Okay. I want to share the first the first text. So I call it, the title is taken from Amos. Will two walk together except they have agreed? So my claim is that one of the, and you know what? The relevant meaning of these two who are sort of walking together, but not necessarily walking together, that will be the, I would say, the axis of this conversation. But in order to, you know, not to just to present it, I want to take it out of one of the best commentators in Israel, Nachum Barnea, who publishes a weekly column in Yediot Achronot for over almost 40 years. Is there anyone willing to read that? Because your English is much nicer than mine, and also my voice will not be pounding on your heads all the time. Anyone? Anyone willing to read? Oops, sorry, too large.
I'll read.
Okay, thank you.
Is it Finkelstein or Finkelstein? That's my first.
Finkelstein, but
Okay.
it's the same person.
Okay, I remember that guy. Arthur Finkelstein, an election strategist who worked with both Netanyahu and Lieberman, defined the different political blocs in Israel better than anyone else. The question, Finkelstein said, is, are you first and foremost Jewish or Israeli? If someone says Jewish, then he's one of ours, he votes right. If they say Israeli, he's one of them, one of the left. Bibi or otherwise, the definition continues to apply today quite exactly. Just a few days ago, I met Ron Holdai in his office on the 12th floor of the Tel Aviv Municipal Building. What are you first and foremost? I asked him, Jewish or Israeli? Israeli, came the instinctive response. That's that, I said, you're a lefty. You even called your new party the Israelis.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I'll take the text off so we can see each other and then bring them back. This is a fantastic insight that a person that had immense influence on Israeli elections, and that's the American Arthur Finkelstein. He's an advisor of Bibi for over 20 years right now. What did you hear? What did you hear? What was the definition? What was the border between the camps in Israel?
Religious identity versus national identity?
You can say so, but I'm not necessarily sure, because, you know, some of the people who would say that they're Jewish first are not necessarily religious. They might be traditional. They might even be secular. That's very important to understand, because, you know, with ultra-Orthodoxy and with the modern Orthodox, the whole block, all right, is, let's say, 15 seats in the Knesset out of 120, 20 seats in the Knesset. So it wouldn't make the difference between the right and left had it only been applicable to religious people. Okay, so yes, national identity versus ethno-national, but, you know, but the interesting thing here that we can explicate, that we can explain it in all kinds of ways, but the magic, and you can say even the I would say, the magic or the trick, if you wish, is that Arthur Finkelstein actually defines, no, how do you call it? Like when there is a crack because of earthquake, no, a rift. Okay, like, excuse me? A crack in, of course, for Jewish Israelis, okay? This is a game we used to play in youth movements all the time. Please define, what are you first? Human, Israeli, Jewish, no. And Arthur Finkelstein understood something in the self-definition of Israelis, which is, I mean, you said an evil political genius. Okay, Nancy, you can say he's evil. But the fact is that it works. It works. It works because when people first and foremost define themselves as Jews, it means that the vocabulary of Judaism, the vocabulary of that particular bond, is for them the most crucial bond. And those who define themselves as Israelis, even though if you ask Ron Huldai, who's the mayor of Tel Aviv, is it important for you that you're Jewish? He would say, of course it's important. But first and foremost, I'm an Israeli. Now, I would say he's a genius because the overlap between being leftist and first saying I'm Israeli and being right and first saying I'm Jewish, which these are the undercurrents, okay? This is exactly what I want to explore, that the crack and the rift in Jewish Israeli society is in that hyphen that was supposed to be connecting us. And that is the hyphen between Israelis, I'm defining myself as an Israeli Jew. There is a hyphen there. It's a hyphenated and a hybrid identity. But unfortunately, the hyphen has been broken for many of us. Some of it was deliberately done by some of our political leaders who kind of, were forcing the break because it served them. Netanyahu part of them, of course. But I would say that the undercurrent of the current Israeli election is the loss and the break of this hyphen between Jews and of Jewish Israeliness, being an Israeli Jew. That hyphen in between the two is almost gone, and we have moved to be a society where people are clinging to one of the two instead of combining them in some way or the other. Now, if we go back, I want to stress that this undercurrent of the break of Jewish Israeliness and the lack of leadership to this project, okay? When I'm now defining myself as an Israeli Jew, I actually don't find in the political system as it is right now a leader that speaks both these languages together in the way which is suitable for me. Of course, I will vote, and I won't vote right, okay? But I mean politically right. I will vote right for what is right for me. But I mean, I would say that center camp that still doesn't find for himself, people in this center camp don't find for themselves a leadership that actually play the need for the combination. Right now, the undercurrent of these elections is still the rivalry, I would say even the hatred of these two camps. Now, I want to go back for a moment to another very important text, and that's the Israeli Declaration of Independence. And this is, of course, a very famous paragraph Anyone willing to read and help me with that?
I can do that.
Thank you, Hannah.
Okay.
Yes.
This right is the natural right of the Jewish people to be masters of their own fate, like all other nations, in their own sovereign state. Thus, members and representatives of the Jews of Palestine and of the Zionist movement are here assembled on the day, I think, in the termination of the British mandate over Eretz Israel, and by virtue of our natural and historic right, and on the strength of the resolution of the United Nations General Assembly, hereby declare the establishment of a Jewish state in Eretz Israel to be known as the State of Israel.
This is the moment of birth of this term. Oh, sorry. I didn't want to put it here before. I wanted to appear right now. Okay. Where do you see it in this text? I mean, this is the amazing ability of Ben Gurion, who actually forged the document to create the moment of the combination. Where do you see this combination? In the text.
Natural and historic right.
Right. Of the Jewish people.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
You see it
That
both
would
in the
develop
first
to be
and-
what?
You see it both in the first and the last paragraph of that particular of the second of the first full paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, members and representatives of the Jews of Palestine and of the Zionist movement, and then, of course, the last thing, Jewish state in Eretz Israel.
Fantastic. So here, thank you, Dova. So here you can actually see in your own eyes, in one paragraph of this fantastic text that was carved by Ben Gurion, in a very, I would say, skillful way, you can actually feel the moment of transition, and from these Jews of Palestine and Jews of the world in the Zionist movement, the transformation of them into a political entity which is now called Israel. And here we have the moment of birth of this hyphen. Okay, let's color it in blue. The hyphen that turned Jews into Israelis and somehow combined them in a new fusion. I just want to express how revolutionary this is. For many of us Israeli tzabras like I am, we don't see this anymore. But I think many of you can see it because you can look on us from the outside as well and see the transition from, sometimes there are big bangs in history. Of course, historical processes are not usually just a moment. But here, on May 13th, we were the Jewish people. On May 15th, we suddenly had a state. This is a big bang. Again, people from my generation don't see it anymore as a big bang, but it is a big bang. From a minority culture to a majority culture, from a community into sovereignty, from a non-binding geography to a geography. There's so many levels of this big bang, okay? And at the core of the big bang was some sort of an attempt to create this new form of a human. I don't mean physically, but I mean spiritually and identity-wise, that is called an Israeli Jew. And for many, many years, it has been, taken from all kinds of sides. But there were many, many people that were in that project. And I think the undercurrent of the coming election is the question of the hyphen between the Israelis and the Jews. Is it still there? Can we build something which is viable and meaningful and productive? I just want to stress, one of the moments of explosion of these two parts of the fusion was the assassination of Rabin. You all recall that moment. And former President and then Prime Minister Peres said then an unfortunate sentence that he regretted for many years after. He said, the Jew killed the Israeli. The Jew, the assassin, I don't even want to mention his name, killed Yitzhak Rabin, who was, the symbol of that Israeli, from the Palmach and 48 and all of that. He regretted that sentence immensely because he felt that it was, instead of calming down the sensitivity and the wound, it just provoked it more. Okay? But we come again to the place where now I want to add what was written before about the pandemic. Now let me add to that another factor. And here's the factor I want to share with you again. You know what? Let's read a little bit more of Ben Gurion that describes the tension between church and state in Israel. In his perspective, it's from 1954, from the early years of the state. And we'll see how we move from there and how the pandemic has transformed this discourse. Because this discourse for many years. As American Jews who are connected to Israel and through BJ, had I asked you, what are the main issues of the tension between religion and state in Israel, what would you say? What are the issues? The classical historical issues of the tension between church and state in Israel. Church, I mean synagogue and state. Okay, Haredim being exempt from national service, one.
Kashrut, weddings,
Kashrut doesn't really matter for so many people, but weddings, of course, the fact that the legal status of all the laws of family, all marital laws, all are connected to religion, to orthodoxy, of course. You cannot get married unless it is through the rabbinate. What else?
The power of the Haredim.
Yes, but of course, the power of the Haredim in the Knesset. This is not strictly a legal issue. This is also a political issue because they are kind of, not always, but for the last 40 years, it wasn't like that in the early days, but they are they make the coalition unless they're there inside. So they get a lot of what they want. But what other issues? So we said marriages. One classical issue is Shabbat. What is public transportation on Shabbat? Thank you, Naftali. Right? What is the character of public Shabbat? Are things closed or open? Every 4 or 5 years, there is a new crisis. You know that Rabin's first government, when he was the prime minister in 1977, you know why it fell? Because there was a bunch of 5 F-16 that came from the States and landed after Shabbat. And they had the welcoming service on Shabbat. So the religious parties quit because of Shabbat. Okay? So it's a serious issue. So Shabbat and marriage, Giyur, conversion. These are the classical issues of the tension between church and state. Now let's read a little bit of Ben Gurion. I want to see what you write on the chat. Civil versus Jewish law, religious assumption, right? And of course, the the complete, I would say, negation of any stream other than orthodoxy, right? You know it better than, of course you know it, okay? So, but let's read what Ben-Gurion wrote here. And I want to share it with you. Few lines for a very interesting article he wrote. By the way, it appears in the annual government kind of book. The last place you would expect to find something interesting to read. It's all numbers and figures and how many cows were bought. But isn't it the greatness of Ben-Gurion that it even took such a dull document like that and turned it into a, I would say, a playground for ideas. So here it is. Yes, someone willing to read? Suzanne, Ben, someone? Yeah, thank you. Please. The separation.
Yeah. The separation of church and state adopted in the United States did not result from anti-religious arguments, but on the contrary, from a deep attachment to religion and a desire to assure for every citizen complete religious freedom. But this comfortable arrangement, even were it adopted in Israel, would not solve the problem. Jewish holidays have a dual meaning, both religious and cosmic, and historic, national. A Jew need not be observant in order to appreciate the great value of the observance of the Sabbath and the holidays as the days of rest and as commemorations that lend Jewish color and historical continuity to our public life. Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles, too, have both historical and national religious meaning. Keep going?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, okay. The religious parties, for religious and other reasons, cannot rest content with the national and social aspects of the Sabbath and the holidays. Anyone committed to the idea of a religious party, a political party being first and foremost an instrument for power, is thereby committed, willingly or not, willingly or not, to establish a religion in the state. The existing arrangement is the product of compromise and is in common with compromise, and as is common with compromises, does not satisfy everyone. This compromise was accepted to prevent a religious war, a war for religion and a war against religion that would seriously obstruct the integration of the exiles, the first of the state's priorities. The compromise can endure only if people with opposing outlooks regarding religion and spiritual matters are able to demonstrate mutual tolerance and the respect by virtue of Jewish solidarity.
Thank you. So this is a wonderful description of a remedy that was developed in the early years of Israel, which is called the status quo. Maybe many of you know this kind of the term, right? You took a snapshot of Israel in 1948 when the Brits left, and you simply kept it. So that's why those of you who have visited here, I mean, I'm sure many of you many times, there are buses in Haifa on Shabbat. Did you know that there are buses on Haifa on Shabbat? How come? Because in the times of the British, there were, and because of the Arab population in Haifa, they kept public transportation going on Shabbat in Haifa. So when Israel was established, the status quo, the snapshot of the things as they were, took Haifa with public transportation. Whip, and you got it. Okay. Now, Ben-Gurion explains in this wonderful exploration of the state of Israel, of the special condition of the state of Israel. First, he explains why is it difficult to separate church and state in Israel.
Because it's a Jewish state.
Because it is a Jewish state, and the nature of Judaism is that it is not only a religion in the way that, name it, I don't know, Name some Protestant stream. I don't know. Usually, one of those who's big in the States. I don't know.
Say
Giving one.
Methodist.
A Methodist. Okay. Judaism is not. It's not a method. It's not parallel to being a Methodist because it is a religion, but it's also historical and ethnic and all these things together. It's interwoven, and even secular people would say that they celebrate Shabbat and Pesach, of course. I remember once I had a friend from Argentina. She made Aliyah to Israel. So on the first Passover, my parents invited her to join. So we went through the streets of Tel Aviv on the eve of Pesach before Leila Seder, and she was struck by the fact that all the restaurants were closed. Now, of course, you know that 95% of the restaurants in Tel Aviv are not kosher. So she said, why are these restaurants closed? Isn't it crazy? Why aren't they open? And I looked on her and I didn't even understand the question. By the way, most of the restaurants in Israel, even those who sell shrimp and pork, have a mezuzah. Why? Because it's a Jewish, it's a cultural thing. So I told her, Romina, the waiters and the chef in this restaurant, which is clearly not kosher, she or he wants to be with his family on Leila Seder. Of course, everything is closed. Nobody wants. They all want to be with their grandmother, or they don't want to be with their grandmother, but they go. So this is why it can't be separated. Nevertheless, he says we have many differences, but we can still bear this strange remedy, or not strange. I would say some sort of a compromise called the status quo. And here I want to bring up his last sentence, which is crucial. The last sentence is this. It ends with the word solidarity. Now let me tell you, you have brought it up yourself. If there is solidarity, and this was always I would say the core of this identity of Zionism that said, I'm willing to cooperate with you even though we disagree. I'm religious and you're secular, but we work for the common. We have a bond. You know what have shown that this bond is already gone, almost gone? The pandemic. This is an unexperienced blow to the sense of solidarity between different groups in Israeli society. And the willingness, and this is Ben-Gurion was such as, of course, I don't have to give him a score, right? We know that. He had such wisdom to understand that people are willing to bear a lot of restrictions. For some of them it was anti-religious, for some of them, but for the sake of the well-being for the good of the well-being of the many. So but suddenly in this pandemic, it has been evidently clear, up front in our eyes, that this solidarity has at least a lot of cracks, if not completely broken down. And I think it has diminished the willingness of people to bear the compromise, because if there is no solidarity, why should I compromise with you, Nancy, or with Ben, or with Hannah, or with Dova, even though we disagree completely, if I don't see that in times of need and of life-threatening moment, you're not there, or I'm not there for you, vice versa. I don't want to make it personal, of course, right? So let me just stress, not only that now it is a question of Israeli Judaism, the striking thing that is happening, which is, I think also, I know it sounds very grim, but I want to say that I'm seeing a lot of optimism in it. It has brought into the center of Israeli society the question of what is Judaism at all. And by the way, it's a debate within ultra-Orthodoxy. The voices that we hear right now from people who lost their relatives within ultra-Orthodoxy is something that I've never heard in this country ever. People from within the ultra-Orthodoxy that are willing to say that this is a complete loss of all the moral scale of what they conceive, they, not me, as a leftist liberal, to be the core of Judaism. And this is a heartbreaking, fantastic, difficult moment. I had to make it clear that I'm teaching, that I'm with you. This is Zoom times. You have to keep your family shut. They're very nice, but they didn't know. Okay. I want to share with you something that we've translated just for this. A headline in one of the daily newspapers in Israel that was striking. I want to share it with you and tell me what you think. I won't say a word. Now you have to talk. Look on this one. It's just from a month ago. So, Yalla, who's reading?
I'll read it.
Thank you.
I'll read. Aryeh Deri and Yaakov Avitan, ministers of the Shas party, abstained from voting as per the guidance of Rabbi Shalom Cohen, president of the Council of Torah Sages. Deri presented the council president with the outlines of the lockdown plan and the relevant considerations. On the one hand, there was the rising rates of infection and illness and the concern of pikuach nefesh, saving a life, while on the other, the total closure of synagogues, schools, kollels, and Talmidei Torah.
Talmidei Torah, like schools. Yes.
Yeshivot, yeah.
Yes.
Rabbi Cohen determined that the lockdown is necessary, but that Deri and Avitan should abstain from voting because of the loss of Torah learning the lockdown would cause. Shas would not support a decision that meant a loss in Torah study and education.
What do you have to say? What do you want to say?
It was very similar here.
Yeah.
I want to jump from my, so I please react, because otherwise I'll do.
Don't we say the Jews choose life?
Nachon.
It was the same frustration as we felt here, when in certain communities in the city that there was a pushback on closing the schools when we knew that the schools were mediums of further infection.
I saw it, and I had dear Helena also pointing it out to me. But you know, there is one major difference. Who are the people that are referred to in this piece of paper? They are ministers, ladies and gentlemen. That's the difference, because that community in Brooklyn that did not obey your mayor, they are a minority group that is either big or small. It can make you happy or not happy. It can make the Jewish face look bad to non-Jews. All of that I understand. but they are not the government. They are the fringe of your society. This is what we have seen here. And it has not still, when I saw it, I took my boy, he's 15. And I wanted him to understand what does he see in front of his eyes. We have it's fantastic that the newspaper, by the way, it's a secular newspaper. It's not a radio. It's like the New York Times or something like that. Washington Times, okay? He was quoting them. And he was balancing two Jewish values. What were the Jewish values? What were the Jewish values?
Pikuach nefesh and Torah.
Pikuach nefesh, right? The sanctity of life, and
Torah.
confronting what?
Yeah.
Torah study.
Torah. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the ministers of Shas did not vote for the lockdown. And they said, even though it's not a pikuach nefesh, even though it's a pikuach nefesh, sorry, even though it's a matter of life and death and we understand it, we can't vote for the lockdown because the loss or the closure of yeshivot.
Yeah.
Now, don't just nod in a, I understand what happened here? Deeply, Jewishly wise, what happened here?
We abandoned the highest mitzvah.
Nachon! Bidiuk! Now, believe me, their people know it better than I do. I mean, quote unquote, I know it as well, but you know what I mean. Now, let me explain it even more vehemently. They relied on me, the secular,
Right.
to vote for the right move. Okay? They counted on the seculars to take what is right to do, because they were reluctant to do it themselves. So עכשיו זה unbelievable. I hope I transmit it. I mean, Jewishly wise, it's unbelievable. This is now why I'm saying this is not like now a fight between Israelis and Jews, the secular and the leftists. This is a complete rearrangement of the question, what is Judaism? Now, I asked you before, what were the classical issues of the church and state tension in Israel? Kashrut, Shabbat, all of them. Do you now understand that all these issues look like children toys compared to this moment? They're all shtuyot. No, how do you say it? They're all nonsense. Because at the moment of crisis, the leaders of Shas, by the way, which is a Sephardi ultra-Orthodox party, voted against Torah, not against me. Now, this is a reshuffle of this whole discussion. And of course, the difference between what happened in Brooklyn and what happened here is this is now a Jewish state. So now the question on the way that Judaism plays out in the public sphere, what are the values that lead it? Wow, this is now a new game. And believe me, I told you in the beginning, I don't think it's completely yet inhaled. We have smoked it. I'm not sure it's a nice metaphor, but you know what I mean. We felt the smell, but I would say the gravity of the crisis is not yet apprehended. It's not yet, I think it's not yet absorbed within the ultra-Orthodox communities. What they have seen, I don't know if you've seen photos of arbitraries. That's how you say, like in Mea Shearim, they change every 2 hours. You know, they're changing all the time and they're dying. So some of their journalists and their leaders, I heard one, I couldn't believe my ears. He said, I want you to know that every child who goes to Talmud Torah, to go to yeshiva, is actually stepping on the corpse of his grandfather. You're killing your own family. And this is the undercurrent of these elections. I know that you will hear about Bibi. I know all of that. But when you said the soul of Israel, I would say that the question of the combination between Israel, being Israeli and being Jewish, and also what is the core of being Jewish and the solidarity between different Jews, and also, of course, with Israeli citizens, Arab Israeli citizens, is another chapter. It's on the table. One of the major papers wrote, what is can we still save the solidarity between us and the state and between the different groups of Israeli society? I just want to say that our president, Reuven Rivlin, has spoke about it now for 5-6 years. He spoke about the 4 tribes of Israeli society and the need to create a new social a bond. Okay, I'll stop here. I want to leave enough time for questions, and I want to close with optimism, because I am. But I know that the picture that I've described is not easy. Of course, these are not easy times, so I can't make it, like all rosy and beautiful, and it's very challenging. Yes, but I'm here to hear all your comments and reactions and rejections, everything.
I parallel between the way the Shas ministers behaved and American politicians in the sense of having things both way, appealing to your base and then relying on others to do the right thing. And I think that a subcontext of what you're talking about here, Rani, or maybe a super context of what you're talking about here, Rani, is the need for our leaders to kind of stand up and do what's right, as opposed to what they think they need to do in order to keep their jobs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wonder if I could.
And comments. So Seth, your comment is a need for maybe for leadership as well, or
need for. I'm sorry.
I wonder if I could ask a sorry.
Sure.
I wonder if I could ask a somewhat related question, not exactly. Please I heard an interview recently by an Arab Israeli who's head of a not-for-profit talking about a desire on the Israeli Arabs to come much closer to Israeli Jews. He said that they are upset with their politicians because they have not delivered on their needs, their lack of infrastructure, their schooling, all that sort of stuff. And he said that Netanyahu has actually been campaigning in Arab towns, saying to the Arabs, what can I do for you? What do you want?
Yes.
Is this a side issue, or is there a possibility that part of the consolidation that may happen is a coming together with Israeli Arabs and Israeli Jews?
Thank you, David. I think it's a fantastic question. We see, as I said before, we see things that we haven't seen on the ultra-Orthodox camp. We see now things on the Arab-Israeli camp that we have never seen before. Now, regardless of the question whether Netanyahu is playing with them after being very anti and saying that they're running to the polls, if you look at it from the bird view, the fact that even for his person, for me, okay, this is my opinion, okay, of course, not everything, but this is my opinion. The fact that he is reaching out to them, even if it's a manipulation, and that suddenly the Arab voice has become something which is, for the first time in 70 years plus, that might be part I would say, not a legitimate, but a part of a new formed government, of a coalition, that, by the way, that both sides are willing to consider it. The Arabs didn't want it before because they didn't want to cooperate with the Zionist party. And the Zionist parties, and especially the right, did not want to cooperate with them. And we see here, and this is part of my optimism, you know, I would say, one fabric is being dismantled by the pandemic and by irresponsible leadership and all kinds of things that you also see in the States. Social media is part of it, a lot of things. But I see the new springs of new bondings that we haven't seen before. And we hear new leaders. You can say that they're manipulated, fine. But you know, we have that our own version of Saturday Night Live. That's a great meter for the popularity of leaders. When they laugh at you, you know that you're part of the game, right? Am I wrong? I don't think so. So there is at least, especially one member of Knesset who is now being escorted. Can you say that? By Netanyahu, who has become one of the stars of Israeli Saturday Night Live. And for me, that's a sign that something is moving here. Still not clear, still not exactly what I would hope for, but things that were considered before treason, unbearable to think of, are suddenly being discussed as something that can happen, that an Arab, yes, there isn't even a member of Knesset, an Arab member blessing, a supporter of Netanyahu in the Likud. Again, I'm not naive to think it's all like beautiful ideology of like, let's make love, not war. Of course not. But politics is the game of the possible, not of the, of the fantasies. It's very interesting to see it. Yes. So thank you for your fantastic question. Other remarks or questions? I think we will, yes, please, if there are, maybe on chat, maybe there were questions on the chat.
I have a comment, if I
yes,
might.
Yes, please do.
It's sort of
yes.
interesting to me that there are parallels and that there are big differences between what's happening here and there. And it makes me, I don't know your thoughts or other people, there's something maybe about this capitalistic model, whatever we call it, that has its life cycle. Maybe they all do. You're much younger than we are, and we're younger than many European countries. But there's the interesting parallel, and that religion in some way is involved. We call it evangelicals or whatever we want to call it here. But the fact that religion sort of now begins to take here it feels like bigger, but probably different is the word. It just hits me that there's something about these systems that has to evolve in different ways, and we don't know how they will evolve.
First of all, I think when I look on it, Israel has certainly, but this is very complex. I wanted to say Israel has certainly moved towards more traditional, but at the same time, it has moved to be more secular. I know that I sound like a Talmudic page, but it's true. On one hand, on the cultural level, many more people define themselves now as traditional or religious, and the whole vocabulary of tradition and religion, and even in music, in popular music, is much higher than when I was a child. On the other hand, things are open on Shabbat to an extent that they have never been before, even in Jerusalem. So it's very interesting who you ask. If you ask the ultra-Orthodox, it has become very secular. If you ask the secular, it has become very ultra-Orthodox. So, and I'm not sure what to say. There are many places where I feel that religion is eating out some sort of liberalism, and I think you see it also in the States. Things that were clear before that should not be religious are not so clear before. One of the places that are the most troubling for me is the army. The IDF has become much more a place with some sort of a religious scent. Rabbis are playing bigger roles in units, things that I don't like, which is strange because but I don't like this melange. I don't like it. But so it's very complex. It's very complex to think where we're heading. The question is not only that Israel is becoming more Jewish, but what sort of Judaism is it? That's again the question. And I think there is I see hope that maybe the borderlines would not be between the secular and the ultra-Orthodox, and because the fact that there is a fraction now within ultra-Orthodoxy, and there is a big I would say balagan, big turmoil there with their old guard and the new guard, and that something will come out of there. I want to react to Marvin's question. How do Israelis are reacting to the politics and violence in the USA? I think, generally speaking, there was shock. The Capitol riots were shock from left to right. I didn't really hear anyone who was, even those people who were Trumpists, and many Israelis are or were, this was one step too far, and they couldn't, and people couldn't take it, so that's about violence in that respect. Still, there are many people here that think that Trump was very good for Israel and all the rest. All the things. I don't want to get into all these kind of politics. But I think most Israelis now, to your question, Marvin, are waiting to see what will be with Biden. There is some sort of this phase. Let's see. It's not.
Toda Rabbah. I'm in a Zoom club with other children of survivors. And it's interesting that after, in the last month, discussion has been made whether it's time to leave the US and move to Israel. Did we learn anything from German history? And did we learn anything from the fall of the Roman Empire? I'm curious what you as a spiritual leader in Israel think of that topic.
Wow. Okay, we have to close. No, I'm joking. It's a very serious question, and believe me, in the course of my life, I'm almost 50. There were moments that I thought exactly the opposite. I know that everywhere in the world I'll be in diaspora. This is my home. I'm very Hebrew, I'm very Israeli. This is my cosmos. I can't leave. I love New York. I love when I come to BJ, I feel at home. Let's put it like that. Okay. But it's a home away from home. This is my home. So just, setting a mirror in front of your eyes, sometimes I thought maybe I'm living in a place that doesn't have a future. especially that I live 1 mile, no, 2 miles from the Temple Mount, which is the most explosive place on earth. You know, with all the Meshuganas that are, you know, it's such a, I feel it's like a reactor, not the one in Iran, but like a religious reactor that can provoke so much violence. If some crazy people, thank God the security forces here know it better than anyone else that they should be kept safe. So I don't want to reduce your question to my, to turn it on its face to my question. But it's very hard for me to answer. I do hope, well, of course, we speak about the decline of empires. I do hope that the story of the US is not necessarily a decline. It's in the hands of people. That, for me, there was a lot of hope that after all, we did see your system function. And there were, on the days of crisis, still people of honor, people even from a different camp that stood up and said, okay, this is too far. We won't. So I hope I'm right, but I don't have a better inside information that you have as a person who's living in the States and know the culture and have the smell of what is going on. Comparing, there is one thing which is making us very proud these days is the rate of vaccination, which is something that we learn to cherish, the system that was developed here by the left, by the way, this mandatory health insurance. People don't know it, but this is one of the main achievements of Rabin. Yitzhak Rabin, who's the person who transformed Medicare in Israel to a national system that is not binded to your ideological orientation, and that in 1992, one of the first laws that Rabin's government passed was Chok HaBriut, the law of health, national health care, that granted every Israeli citizens, no matter what, a basic health insurance. And we now see how powerful this is. So this is I think this is something from left and right, that people are very proud of here. And by the way, this is not a matter for debate. It's interesting. I don't see anyone serious from the right that would claim that we should abolish national health care here, because small government and all kinds of this mode of thinking, American mode of thinking. A public health care here is the basic. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I try to relate to it. One thing which is I think very important for me to say is the importance of the connection with you. I think that in this new pact, hopefully this new bond of Israeli society, the question for me is always, when I define myself as an Israeli Jew, I have two very important bonds that should be taken care of. One is the bond of Israelis who are not Jewish, i.e. Druze, Arabs, Bedouins, all, who are Israelis but non-Jews. The other major, very important family for me are Jews who are not Israelis. And one of the main projects of this, hopefully, new horizon of an identity which is coming out of this crisis, and of things that we do for years, like Beit Tefilah and others, Beit Tefilah Israeli, but we're not alone, is how do we create this Israeli Judaism that maintains one affinity to Israelis who are not Jewish, and the other one, a strong, viable, meaningful, warm, connected with Jews who are not Israelis. And when I'm here this afternoon, here, and morning at your place or noon in your place, I hope that's also something which is very clear, that this discussion is part of that very important part of this identity that I hope is somehow coming out of this new situation.
Rani,
Ken.
I want we're really close to the
Yes,
end
I
of this
know.
lesson, and I just want to like push you a little bit more on the last point that you just mentioned.
Please
And
push me.
just to ask you, so because I'm the shaliach here, and part of what I do is trying to bring people together and create this connection and relationships with Jews which are not Israelis and connect them to Israel. And when in regard to what you spoke about solidarity, which was super interesting, I'm kind of wondering, what do you think is our mutual challenge? When I'm saying our, I mean like the Jewish people. Back, let's say after the Shoah, so it was interesting to see that our mutual challenge is the victims and the survivors and dealing with the Shoah. And also the state of Israel was a mutual challenge for a large portion of the time, and points in history like the Ethiopian Jews that brought to Israel, or the political refugees in the former Soviet Union. What would you say, if there is one, our mutual challenge right now?
Actually, the last text that I brought, but after I speak, maybe we'll post it on the chat. It's a beautiful eulogy of Berl Katzenelson on Bialik, 1934. And he actually says there's something, I'll say it in my own words and then you'll be able to read it. We're now building the home, creating the walls, putting cement, building the roof. We are concrete in the symbolic way, in the real way. We're putting and we don't have time for decorating the living room, the inner of the inside of our home. But there will be one day in a generation to come when the question of the content of this home, which is the name of the home is State of Israel, there will be a generation where this question will be the core of their project. I feel this is our project right now. What is the Jewish content of the State of Israel? And in that respect, you are I didn't just start to flatter people here about my connection with BJ. I think we have a lot to learn from each other. There is nobody said, when I entered BJ, nobody told me, take a good look, they are your brothers and sisters, and behave. I simply came in and I fell in love because there was something truthful that spoke to me in the way that you exercise your Judaism. And I hope that when you come to our homes, you also see that. Of course, you can't take it fully back there, as we didn't take it fully to here. But I think this is the generation where we can actually talk. Somehow without that old Israeli, we're the new Jews, we're with all the muscles and all of that. We're a little bit after that. And maybe also with you changed, with time. And there is so much that we can do together and we have to be together. I'm asking myself, how does Judaism play in a democracy? There is no better beacon than what you do in the States, for me. Now, of course, I can't cut and paste it to Israel because this is a state and but still. And I hope that there are things that we do that can nourish you. So this is how I see I see here a great potential. I met so many young Israelis, maybe you can testify, that said, we left Israel as Israelis, we came back as Jews after we met people in the States. Now my question is, we can't take all of them to BJ. We need to create that bond here and there. And it's not easy. It's not easy. We're living in different sides of the world, but I think it's doable. I really think it's doable. And it's important and we'll benefit from it. I know because I've experienced it. This is not something that I sell to someone else as a, as a strategic agenda. This is my life, my personal life.
I agree.
And also I think now the life of my kids, of our kids. And I think it can work. I really think it can work. What I wanted to expose in a way, it was a sort of an exposure of where we are as a society. And let me tell you, some of the things that I brought here are not, of course I know they're not easy, but I didn't come here to play, oh, everything is so great. But I think many of you will agree that from moments of crisis, there is also a great potential of growth. Hatikva. I mean, we've been there so many times. I think we can do it. I mean, I believe in Hatikva. I believe in it. Bemet.
Rani, thank you so much. What a great message of endurance and solidarity. Toda rabba. Thank you all for participating, and I hope to see you also next month.
Take a look on the chat. I've posted the beautiful lines of Beryl on Bialik. When he was really a prophet, I feel he was describing us. 70 years from where he stood, 80 years from where he stood. Toda rabba lachem. Thank you very much.
Toda rabba, mitzuyenet.
Yeah.
Toda rabba, להתראות.
להתראות. And I hope to
Thank
meet
you.
in person.
Soon.
Do you have a shul in Yerushalayim too? You said you live near the old city.
The shul that I'm one of the leaders of is in Tel Aviv.
Right.
So I'll take a look. We're doing the Port Kabbalot Shabbat in the summer. Take a look on Google. I'm just writing our name here. I didn't want to.
Is there a BJ shul and type shul near your house in Yerushalayim?
Sure. Zion. I wrote our name in Tel Aviv, and also Kehilat Zion, which is a beautiful, beautiful community that I often go to when I'm here in Jerusalem. So these are two places that I hope that you will visit and feel at home. I should have said it before, but I'm saying it right now. Toda rabba. Thank you so much.
להתראות.
תודה רני, להתראות.
Bye, thank you.
אביר, אתה רוצה להישאר רגע?
כן, אפשר להישאר. איך היה לך?
מה? סליחה, לא שמעתי.
שאלתי איך היה.
תראה, אני בדרך כלל לא מדבר...
בצ'אט קיבלתי כל מיני שהם ממש שמחים, ושאתה אחלה, ושוונדרפול.
טוב, אתה יודע, אמריקאים תמיד אפשר לסמוך על ה-wonderful ו-amazing וזה. אבל אני בדרך כלל לא מדבר פוליטיקה ככה, straight.
כן.
כאילו, זה לא פוליטיקה במובן המפלגתי, לא אמרתי ככה או ככה, למרות שהיה די ברור מה דעתי.
כן.
אבל אני כן חושב שלפעמים צריך להסתכל לפוליטיקה ישר בעיניים, מה עוד שאני חושב שהרגע הפוליטי הזה הוא באמת, יש בו יותר באמת ממה שנדמה רק, כאילו שחיתות, כן, לא ביבי, יש פה... אני אפילו חושב שזה מה שאמרתי להם, אולי זה עוד לא יצא בבחירות האלה, אבל זה תכף יצא. כל הסיפור עם החרדים, כל השבר הפנימי בתוך החרדים.
כן.
זה הולך להיות משהו גדול.
זו הייתה פרספקטיבה מעניינת. רגע, אבל כל העניין הזה שיש פה, אני בהתחלה חשבתי שתדבר על זה שכאילו חלק מעליית הימין, זה העובדה שכאילו הציבור הישראלי נהיה יותר יהודי, כאילו, אז דווקא זה...
נכון. זה גם זה, אמרנו את זה, כן, ברור. בתודעה העצמית שלו, אנשים נהיו קודם כל יותר יהודים, זה חשוב.
כן.
לא? אולי זה לא היה מספיק ברור, אז עכשיו אני חושב, אולי הייתי צריך להגיד את זה יותר, כאילו
לא,
ככה.
זה מה שחשבתי, כאילו, אבל לקחת את זה עוד צעד אחר כך.
לקחתי את זה עוד צעד, כי אני חושב שמה שקרה פה, מה שאתה מתאר זה נכון, אבל מה שאנחנו רואים בחודשים האחרונים, שהשאלה של עכשיו, מה זה היהודי הזה, הסתבכה לגמרי. לגמרי הסתבכה.
נכון.
כי בעצם אני רציתי להגיד מה שאתה אמרת, הציבור היהודי זז ימינה, כאילו לא זז ימינה, זז לצד היהודי, אבל הסיבה שהיה לי חשוב להביא את שני, במיוחד את השני, על דרי וזה, זה בשביל להסביר, תראה, מי שמגדיר את עצמו עכשיו כיהודי, עכשיו הוא כאילו, אחרי אקט כזה, ואחרי מה שהוא ראה עם החרדים, אני רואה את זה מהתלמידים של אשתי וזה, הוא לא יכול אלא לשאול את עצמו, בסדר, אני יהודי, אבל מה זה? זה? זה האנשים האלה שלא מתחסנים?
כן.
תבין, זה כאילו, בסדר, אוקיי, אז הם יותר יהודים מישראלים, אבל פתאום זה...
פתאום הם צריכים להתמודד עם מה זה היהודי הזה.
נכון, ולא בשאלות של שבת וכשרות וגיור, זה מעניין לי את האוזן, אתה יודע, יאללה, יום אחד. זה עכשיו עניין של חיים. עכשיו, מה שמדהים זה שהוויכוח על מה זה היהדות הזאת, הוא לא רק, נניח, החילונים מול הדתיים, זה הדתיים בתוך הדתיים.
כן. והחרדים
בתוך החרדים.
נכון.
זאת אומרת, במובן הזה, זה לא אמרתי את זה ככה, כי לא רציתי שזה יישמע גם מתנשא, כאילו, אבל זה באמת, אם מסתכלים על זה רגע מלמעלה, זה המובן העמוק של מדינה יהודית, שיש ויכוח ציבורי על מהי יהדות.
כן.
זה באמת מובן העומק של הסיפור הזה.
נכון.
עכשיו, זה ויכוח נורא קשה, ובמקרה של המגפה הוא הפך להיות ויכוח חיים. אתה מבין? זה לא עכשיו סוגרים לא פותחים חנויות בשבת.
פילוסופי, זה...
בדיוק. לא, תראה, גם גיור וגם נישואים זה לא ויכוח פילוסופי, זה ויכוח מאוד קונקרטי, אבל זה אף פעם לא חיים ומוות.
נכון.
פתאום זה נהיה ויכוח של חיים ומוות. ועכשיו זה משחק אחר לגמרי.
מעניין מה יהיה, אתה יודע, זה גם מאוד מעניין להם, אני חושב, כי בסופו של דבר, אתה יודע, הרבה פעמים, גם במיוחד בשליחות הקודמת, לפני 10 שנים, תמיד היו מסתכלים עלינו, בטח כשהיינו מגיעים מהסוכנות, היו מסתכלים על הישראלים כחילונים, כן? כי בסוף, הישראלים שהם פגשו, זה ישראלים חילונים, לא פגשו עכשיו חרדים, או אפילו לא דתיים לאומיים. והיום להסתכל על החברה הישראלית, בתור חילונית לגמרי,
בטח.
זה בעייתי.
בעייתי, ברור.
טוב, בסדר.
טוב, תספר לי מה הם אמרו, כן מעניין לדעת.
כן, נכתוב לך.
יש לי גם, אני חשבתי לעשות משהו דומה לזה בעוד איזה שבוע, אולי אני צריך, בסדר, זה נתן לי גם...
לא, אבל אני חושב שזה היה טוב, זה היה מתעניין, גם ראית לפי השאלות שהם, זה משהו שמדבר...
כן, גם אנשים לא עזבו, זה גם אומר משהו.
כן. אז המון תודה, ונהיה בקשר.
יופי.
מה, אני מקווה שנעשה משהו השנה.
גם, הגיע הזמן.
כן, משהו ביחד. אני עובד הרבה עם ליאורה וניגון הלב.
נו, אז מתי נעשה משהו באמת?
מה אתה חושב שאפשר לעשות? תגיד לי,
מה אתה עושה עם ליאורה?
עם ליאורה אני עובד עכשיו על יום העצמאות, אז הבני נוער שלנו עושים איזה שיר ביחד, מקליטים איזה שיר ביחד, ואיתה אני מרכיב את הטקס הבדלה שאנחנו עושים בין יום הזיכרון ליום העצמאות. שזה כאילו, אתה יודע, טקס הבדלה יהודי, אבל...
כן, זה טוב, זה קלאסי באמת.
כן, זה קלאסי לבי-ג'יי גם.
זה חלק מה... אבל בסדר, אם אתה כבר עושה את זה איתה, אז...
יש לכם דברים אונליין שאפשר להמיר לאנגלית, שיכול לעניין, לא יודע.
מה, אתה מתכוון שיעורים וכאלה?
כן, או שיעור שאתה יודע, שאני אוכל לפרסם, או איזה אירוע של איזה דובר, אבל אולי אפשר להביא דובר באנגלית ולעשות את זה חצי-חצי. מה שתגיד לי, אתה יודע.
למה לא נעשה משהו... כאילו... אפילו שיחה של הרבנים, מפה ומשם.
כן, שיחה על ישראל, נגיד?
לא, על ישראל, על המגפה, לא יודע. כאילו, תראה, אני לא בא, כאילו מה, לתת מרצה שהוא מתורגם, לא יודע, אני גם צריך לחשוב מה יביא את האנשים שלנו
כן, מה יעניין?
מה מושך גם כאילו לשמוע אתכם? אני לא רוצה רק שזה יהיה כאילו תורה מישראל, אני רוצה גם תהיה תורה מניו יורק.
כן. אז מה, אני לא יודע, מה תחומי העניין, נגיד, מה דברים שהם בדרך כלל מביאים אנשים אצלכם?
אני חושב שאנשים מתעניינים, א' בארצות הברית, וב' יש גם אנשים שמכירים את BJ היטב, ובאופן כללי, אתה יודע מה, אני אתייעץ גם עם הצוות. אני חושב שזה...
בסדר.
צריך לחשוב באמת על משהו שיהיה...
כן, או אפילו על נושא, ואז ניצוק לזה תוכן, אתה מבין? כאילו, תגיד לי...
כן, זהו, אבל זה צריך להתאפס באיזה רגע. טוב, אתה יודע את זה מצוין. יש כאילו, אנשים שומעים, האוזן קרויה, למשל, סביב החגים, טוב, אז יש כל החשבון, נפש, אתה יודע, משהו בזמן פותח שמיעה, פותח איזה האזנה. אני צריך לחשוב מה... הנה, שנה שעברה היה את כל העניין הזה של התיקון, שרולי רצה שנלמד ונעשה,
כן, שבועות.
סתם זה, לא יודע. לא יודע אם אפשר לעשות באמת חברותה בין אנשים אצלכם ואצלנו, זה נראה לי קפיצה יותר מדי מורכבת, עם כל הבדלי השפה.
האנגלית וזה.
טוב, תן לי לחשוב. צריך לגלגל איזה...
כן.
צריך לגלגל איזה משהו, כי זה באמת מתבקש, זה באמת...
כן, אתה יודע, אני כל פעם מנסה לשמור קצת על קשר, אני קורא קצת באתר, אני שולח להם בניוזלטר, קצת מה קורה אצלכם, אז עם אסטבן, שלח לי כמה שורות, אני עושה את זה גם עם קהילת ציון, חשוב לי הקשר, כאילו, אתה יודע, שיש מישהו בישראל שהם לא עכשיו ישראל באיזו צורה נורא נורא מופשטת, אלא יש קהילה, זה מאוד עוזר לחזק את הקשר.
בוודאי. בוודאי, זה הופך את זה ממשהו כללי ל...
כן, לצערי, אתה יודע, אין עכשיו את הנסיעות לארץ, אז גם
בדיוק.
קשה לבקר, וקשה לבוא ולהגיד שלום, צריך לצאת מהתקופה הזאת שאנחנו לא, אתה יודע, אנחנו לא לגמרי מנותקים.
מעניין אם אפשר היה לעשות משהו כזה מטורף של, כאילו להזמין אנשים לבקר בבתים, אבל דרך לא יודע.
בבתים של אנשים?
לא יודע, בוא נגלגל את זה, אבל לא ניתן לשיחה לדוח, כאילו
בסדר גמור.
ניצור משהו. יופי, תודה אביר.
תודה רבה, תודה רבה.
בכיף להתראות. ביי ביי.